Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Hey, X. So, this thing has been happening to me lately that I'd like your opinion, help on. I work at a little convenience store located right next to a beach in NNY. We always have lots of customers, plenty of them are locals just dropping in to get soda and snacks, but at this point in the year and later, we're getting more and more summer people in campers and whatnot. I get plenty of weirdness and assholes. But nothing has been weirder than this girl that's been showing up. She always comes by around 5 p.m. on this little moped, sopping wet as though she had just dragged herself out of the lake. She comes in wearing just her bathing suit, dark sunglasses, and walks to the back of the store. The first time this happened, me and the girl who works my shift with me, really didn't think much of her. There are some inconsiderate people in the world, and walking in while dripping water wasn't the worst she could do. We had kind of lost track of her, even though she was the only person there. After about 4 o'clock, people don't really come to the beach to swim. We only remembered when we heard a whole rack of 2-liter sodas hitting the ground, and a prompt explosion of one. Tanya and I both rolled our eyes. Cleanup was going to be a bitch, but we usually waited for the customer to come to us with damaged goods. And nothing. Not a peep other than the air conditioner and the sound of the soda leaking out onto the linoleum. I finally left the front desk to go and check it out, but when I got there, all I found was a pile of root beers with one open on the floor. The aisle was empty. Thinking I might have just missed her, or she somehow passed me without me noticing on the other side of the aisles, I combed the 3 shelves as well as the back alcove with local paraphernalia, and found nothing. By then I was convinced we had not only someone who damaged goods, but a thief. I went to the window as quickly as I could with wet shoes to grab the girl's plate number. And nothing. No moped, no vehicles at all. I could see a line of wet prints coming into the shop and leaving, and they were already dissolving in the heat. I went back to Tanya, and we bitched at length about the inconsiderate girl. I asked her if she'd caught the girl ducking out, but she hadn't, even though she had been arranging the store's front display of s'mores makings and handwritten sign of campwood. We decided we'd keep an eye out for her and not mention anything to the store owner, yet. We cleaned up the mess and thought nothing of her for the rest of the shift. The next time we saw the inconsiderate girl, she rode up on her little moped as before. It was easy to hear the whine of the engine and see her through the front. She walked in, still wearing her 2-piece, still sopping wet and dripping onto the floor, and still wearing sunglasses. Upon entering, she walked to the back of the store, as before. Tanya and I exchanged looks and I followed the girl to the back. She's standing there, staring into the alcoholic drinks cooler, completely still. She's maybe the size of a small tween, a little on the thin side, with tons and tons of sopping wet hair. And she's just standing there, staring, completely still, making a puddle. "Hi, can I help you find something?" I ask and approach her. She doesn't respond, doesn't even look in my direction. Just stands there, staring. I'm sort of directly behind her, to her left at this point. I'm a little worried that despite my size compared to hers, she could end up being completely crazy and try to hurt me. Finally, she turns her head to speak to me. Her head's at a funny angle, as if she's hurt her neck, and asks me if I have any raspberry wine coolers. I try to helpfully direct her to other flavor choices, but she just makes small, non-committal sounds. At this point, I'm getting a little freaked out. She's still soaking wet. I can easily see her skin has goosebumps, but she's not shivering. She has this kind of lethargic manner of speaking and moving, and when she does move, she kind of wavers and then corrects herself, like someone recovering from heatstroke or something. She doesn't sound drunk or high or anything. Eventually, after a rousing argument about our lack of wine coolers, not really, it went something like, "Sorry, I guess we don't stock anything in that flavor. Maybe try strawberry? It's okay. Or mango, that's good. There's mixed packs, too. It's okay. She zombie shuffled to the snacks aisle behind her and clumsily swiped at a bag of onion rings. Clutching this, she shuffled back to the front of the store, and despite the fact I immediately turned to dog her to the front of the store, I had somehow lost track of her in the aisles. I found her waiting for me at the front desk with the onion rings on the counter. She was standing with her back to me, completely still fucking dripping. I had no idea how it was possible for one person to retain this much water. At this point, I felt a little bolt of unease, even stronger than when we first saw her, and immediately realized why. She didn't fidget or look around like normal people would while waiting in line. She didn't seem upset there was no one there to ring her up. Tanya seemed to have bailed, and we were perfectly alone. I kind of hesitantly circled behind her to get to the flap to let me behind the desk. As I passed her, I could hear this strange little chittering sound coming from her, and when I got behind the desk, I figured out why. Her teeth were chattering violently. I hadn't seen her face up close until then. Though most of it was obscured behind giant sunglasses, the rest of it was completely impassive aside for her chattering teeth. Mind you, I really didn't examine her too closely. She was really freaking me out at this point. I rang up her purchase and waited patiently. After a long pause, she detaches a little change purse from the hip of her bathing suit and fishes out a $1 bill and some change. It isn't exact, and I have to break open a roll of quarters to give her the correct amount back. The girl's unnerving teeth chattering has now stopped. I count out the change, out loud, because I'm nervous and I get chipper when I get nervous, and go to hand it to her. She just stands there, however. She doesn't reach out to accept the change, so I cover the awkwardness by bagging her onion rings and tell her the change is in the bag. She opens her mouth and a burbling sound comes out, like she's trying to breathe and there's water in the way. I get a little disgusted jolt, and, model employee that I am, patiently wait for her to try again. She clears her throat and promptly coughs up a goodly amount of fluid onto the counter. She doesn't say anything after this. She slowly reaches up and wraps her fingers around the handle and then walks to the door. It rings as she pushes her way out. I am a little worried at this point, but also considerably upset. I don't like having to clean up customers' bodily fluids, but it's part of the job description, and I call to Tanya, wherever the fuck she is, to get some Clorox and paper towels from the back. At this point, Tanya hesitantly pokes her head out from the back and then, seeing I'm alone, comes out. She then proceeds to tell me how she had been watching the camera feed from above the booze cooler, the other place we monitor, while I'd been interacting with the girl. She swore up and down that the girl's face didn't have a reflection, that is, she could see a dark shape where the girl's head was, but no facial features. She said she could even see mine, clear as day, but the girl's reflection was just this indistinct shadow. I hadn't noticed anything of the sort, and even though this was creepy, I wasn't very inclined to believe Tanya. Tanya is nervous by nature and has a habit of stretching the truth a little. So I take her story with a grain of salt, even though she seems legitimately scared, and adamantly refuses to be in the store when the girl is here in the future. In fact, she wanted to complain to our boss about her, and possibly even file a complaint with the police. I tell her she's overreacting, and needs to calm down. She does, but is wide-eyed and jumps for the rest of the night until we close down. When we are packing up to go home, about an hour after the girl comes in, Tanya, who is getting into her car next to the dense bushes by the parking lot, suddenly screams and leaps practically over her hood to get away from them. I immediately drop my bike, I live a mile from work, and it's good exercise, and run over to see what the matter is. Tanya is babbling on and on about she thought she saw a body in the woods, and she swore it was the girl, and on and on and on. We both go over to check and, surprise surprise, there's nothing there. Tanya is whimpering and crying at this point, and point out that, there's a fucking flip over there, it's her fucking flip. And indeed, it looks to be a twin of the pair the girl wears into the store, a bright neon orangey pink. I eventually managed to calm her down by saying it could be anyone's, and said she probably only saw it out of the corner of her eye, and her brain just filled the rest in. Tanya wasn't convinced, but was significantly calmer. She disagreed with me taking the flip-flop home with me. Now I'm beginning to regret it myself. I honestly don't know what possessed me to. I kind of wanted to show Tanya how ridiculous she was being, that, hey, look, I took home a creepy, dreaded item, and I survived. And partly that if I saw the girl again, I would give it back to her. I'm a big proponent to paying it forward in social niceties. This was last Friday that we found the flip-flop, and I took it home. We go home, and I blow the incident off. I make a pizza, drink some beer, and leave the offending sandal by the door. Like I said, I kind of did it without thinking. I only work Mondays to Fridays in the store, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., so when I brought it home with me intending to bring it to the store the next day, I realized my error. I honestly have no idea how the girl got my address. I asked Tanya about it later, and she swears up and down she never talked to the girl, and the girl never talked to her. But the very next day after taking the flip-flop, the girl shows up at my house. It was sometime after 3 this last Saturday when I heard a knock at the door. I don't get many visitors, and people who know me usually just walk in and call out a hello. But I went to the door without wondering much, expecting possibly an itinerant meat salesman or something. I stupidly didn't even look outside before opening the door. The inconsiderate girl was standing just on the other side, sopping wet, with what looked like fresh water. She was still wearing the same bathing suit and sunglasses, and was now missing a sandal. She said quietly that she realized she had lost her shoe at the store, and wondered if I had saved it for her. It was the longest speech I'd ever heard from her mouth. For some reason I didn't really think it was odd that she knew that I had it. I was actually kind of pleased that she was talking to me now. I smiled and ducked back inside and retrieved the item and offered it out to her. She just reached out and took it, and her fingers brushed mine. She was ice cold and clammy, and her fingers had the weird texture skin gets when it's underwater too long. She thanked me quietly, and, for conversation, I complimented her on her dedication to her swimming. I figured she must have gone all the time. She told me she hated swimming, and was actually afraid of water. I really had no idea what to say to that. I told her I hoped she would have a good day, and asked her if she needed anything. She kind of wavered and then haltingly reached up to touch her glasses. She asked if she could borrow a towel or something. She would be sure to return it. I was actually a little relieved she finally acknowledged her abnormally soaking wet condition, and fetched a beach towel. She wrapped it around herself slowly when I returned, and said something I didn't really expect.
Not many people would help me. Thank you.
This kind of struck me. I wanted to know if she wanted me to call anyone for her. She really didn't seem fit to drive, and she seemed to consider this. She asked if she could borrow my phone, so I went to go get it. When I got back, she was gone. My beach towel was neatly folded on the top step. By the way, I forgot to add that the fluid she coughed up on the front desk appeared to be water. I really don't have much knowledge about what happens to water once it's processed in a person's stomach, but it appeared to be just plain water. Still gross to clean up, though. Obviously that messed me up a little bit again. How the hell did she take off so quickly without me noticing? What was even worse was that I began seeing her a lot. When I went to go into town to buy groceries on Sunday, I saw her standing at the entrance to the beach, on the other side of the ticket booth. I didn't really think much of it until I got back, unloaded my groceries, and got a tap on my patio door. At first I had just pegged it down as some bird, but as the tapping continued, I realized it was man-made, and poked my head out of the kitchen to check. It was the girl. She was standing on the other side of the glass, one hand pressed on it and staring in. I flipped out internally, but went to the patio. She's a litter dryer at this point, no water dripping off of her visibly, but she definitely still looks like she climbed out of a pool less than half an hour ago. I cracked open the door and asked if she needed help. She asked if she could come in and wait for her ride since her moped had broken down. I was waffling a little at this point, but she was honestly acting much more normal than I'd ever seen her before. Maybe it was just the illusion being dry gave her, but I eventually relented. I'm a grown-ass man, and I'm not afraid of some tiny little girl. When she stepped inside, I realized she was trailing a beach towel almost identical to mine. I led her to the living room, where she courteously spread out her towel on the couch before sitting. I asked her where her moped had broken down. She had said it wasn't far, but she couldn't go home with it like that. I asked who was picking her up, and her face crumpled a little. Her boyfriend was coming from the beach to get her. He was a lifeguard there. I was beginning to understand why she spent so much time at the beach, and struck up a conversation about it. But she insisted she hated swimming, hated the water, and furthermore, hated her boyfriend. By this last part, I was stunned.
So where is the video footage of the girl?
We don't keep records of the security footage. Like I said before, my boss is pretty cheap. Tanya was watching me in real time talking with the girl, like the giant puss she is. Anyway, as I was saying, her vehemence shocked me. As I was awkwardly fumbling through how I was sure it wasn't that bad, I heard this sort of aborted squalling. I realized quickly it was a ringtone, but badly warped. The girl reaches to a flip phone she's clipped to her bathing suit bottom. It's been making an epileptic flashing, but when she opens the phone, I can see the screen is dead. She totters to her feet and shuffles to the front door. She wraps her towel around her and stumbles out. I stepped out behind her, and just as I looked up, saw her climb into the back of a black pickup on elevated wheels. The thing was blacker than fuck with tinted windows and straight pipes. The fucker roared off with her in the back, and that was the last I saw of her until today. Wow. Hi guys, sorry I was gone for so long, a ton of stuff happened. As someone mentioned, it's an odd time for me to be posting since I work 6 to 6. Due to my boss's incredibly stingy nature, I can only work those hours every other day. On other days, I work from 3 to 6. He tries to keep us from having full-time jobs as much as possible. Sometimes, he switches days as is convenient to him, like yesterday. Anyway, as I was saying, Sunday had been the last I had seen her, except yesterday, when I had gone to the beach to deliver an order from some rich asshole. My boss had decided he didn't want me to work today, and I do odd jobs for people around town. One of them is delivering groceries for the incredibly rich people in the Campers Association on an island off town. I decided to drop in at work when I did, pick up some shit for myself and wander down to the beach, as I don't get to see it that often despite the fact I work so close to it. I was there relatively early, so the beach was deserted. There were a few people who camped here walking the beach for exercise, and lifeguards getting set up, but other than that it was just the seagulls and me. It gave me a really peaceful feeling. I love the lake, and whenever I can, I walk and explore what I can. So I did, right in the past where the lines were marked where you could swim. As you can imagine, the further I went, the fewer the people there were until I passed a large rock, and I was alone. As I wandered, looking at the lake and nothing in particular, I noticed something bobbing on the top of the water not too far out. It's not too unusual to have junk floating in the water, but usually it's seaweed or a dead fish or something, and this was brightly colored. After looking at it properly, I could easily identify it as a flip-flop. I started to walk forward, judging where the flip-flop was going to make a landing on the beach, when my foot caught something that wasn't sand textured. I looked down. It was the bottom half of a two-piece bathing suit that tied at the hips with different thin stripes of blue, aqua, and turquoise. It was covered in sand, as though it had been buried and emerged due to the heavy amount of traffic that dug it up. It was exactly the same bathing suit that the girl wore, but I brushed it off, as you could have bought the same one from any Target in the country. Still, it gave me an uneasy feeling. The longer I stayed in the same place, the longer I felt a growing unease. I looked back out to the lake and squinted at the flip-flop that was now about 10 feet from the shore and about 100 feet down the beach from me. I jogged to get it. I waded into the water, and when I pulled it out, found a flip phone attached to the thong of the sandal. My feeling of dread skyrocketed into panic. But before I could really think about what I was going to do about it, someone shouted from up the beach. One of the lifeguards was running down the beach towards me with a grim expression. "You can't be in the water down here," he called, and then when he got to me added, "and the beach isn't open for swimming yet." I went through a list of excuses and apologies, and then showed him the flip-flop and the sandal, told him about the girl. The guy turned as white as a sheet. He listened intently, before shakily scruffing a hand through his hair, agreeing with me that it was pretty weird, and he would file a complaint. He was obviously not adding something, so I asked him what was wrong. He really seemed to want to talk about it, and after a few seconds of thinking about it, finally said, "It's just really weird. It's a really big coincidence." He told me how a few years beforehand this girl had been drowned at the beach by her lifeguard boyfriend. He'd been suspected and was the prime suspect in the crime, but hadn't been charged or convicted, and he still lifeguarded at the beach today. Most people didn't think he did it. Everyone knew he had been messing around on her with other girls, but it's not like that's a good reason to kill someone. Especially if you're just dating. The people the lifeguarded at the beach thought there might have been a pregnancy involved, though. Douchey McDoucherson lifeguard had been complaining about his whiny, needy, complaining girlfriend wanting to bring a kid into the relationship, which he was not cool with. Most people on the lifeguard team thought of him as a psychopath. The girl disappeared about a week after people had heard him complaining, and had been found drowned on the rocky part of the beach a few days after her disappearance. My lifeguard buddy said he would take the stuff I had found and keep it up at the office. He said he'd give it to the police instead of keeping it at the lost and found, because he was pretty sure it was some of the dead girl's effects that hadn't been found. As you can probably guess, she hadn't been found with her bathing suit bottom, left flip-flop, or cell phone. I let the guy take it, and walked back with him to the office. I figured it was all just a coincidence. I asked what the girl's name had been, in case I saw my mystery twin again. The guy kind of hesitated, but told me anyway. I went about my business after the guy went back to the office, leaving it in his hands. No, I didn't take pictures of the things I found. But if I do see my mystery girl again, I'll ask if her name is Arizona, not her real name, obviously, but she is named after an American state, and I arbitrarily picked a different one. Fight or flight as an animal response, but not really. Not that those two emotions don't boil up inside you, but that it's a misnomer. Fight means you face your adversary, whatever it is, head on, while flight means you avoid confrontation for another time. Having felt it, I understand what deer may feel when they hold so perfectly still in front of car headlights, staring down insurmountable odds of some unknown, unthinkable danger. It's so easy to believe that fear makes your blood boil, that you explode into some response, but so often, like that deer, your blood freezes, and you don't know what to do. In my school we had a senior skip day. It was tradition. Every year we'd go down to the local water park and we'd see if we could beat the previous year's high score. We'd go down one of the covered water slides, and one person would plug it up, and we'd see how many of our other high school class could fill up the slide. The lifeguard on duty was another student, having taken the day off from school to allow it. It was tradition. He previous year had managed a commendable 56 kids. It was hard to be sure. It was difficult to keep count before the weight forced everyone through. We were going to blow that record away, it was what I was told. We were going to reach 70. It was a great, sunny day and we were all prepared and excited. We let the guy on the football team line up first. Their strength and weight would be capable of holding up the line. Then we went through, one by one, cramming into the small space. I was near the middle. It was a fun slide, until I slammed up against a body in front of me. It was painful for me, my heels digging into his back, and I could only imagine what it was like to him, until the next forced their way into me. My legs went under his arms, my feet against a person too in front of him, and I braced myself with my arms against the slide, the water coolly rushing between us. I sat there, crammed between two people, my arms tired trying not to become pressed against the person in front of me. I remember his skin, slick and tan, with water pouring past us both of our mouths locked in a smile, enjoying our little prank. I must have been there for 5 or 10 minutes, the atmosphere becoming hot with the heat of bodies all shoved into that tiny, confined space, forcing the water up to our chins. The laughter turned to panic. I could hear a girl scream first, and then a crack, like thunder, from behind us. Screams turned to yells, turned to panic. Then we could all feel it. Our weight was too much, and the slide began to slump. One of the pillars holding the slide had broken away, and the slide leaned violently near the middle. I began to scream with the rest of them. My body was forced into a cramped fetal position, nearly drowning in the rushing water, my cheek against someone's back, as people forced and fought their way through. I could hear cries out, begging us to let go, but we were trapped. Then, hardly able to breathe, caused either by the weight forced on me, or the water rising up to my eyes, I could feel it. A section has collapsed, the one directly behind me. It leaned down, and fell forward unloading the other children to the concrete walkway 3 stories below us. It forced ours backwards, and we, lifted up. My hands braced, I could feel the person behind me grab my waist, keeping him from falling. Screams, and cries for help rained out from behind us. They kept changing, different pitches from the boys and from the girls as each fell through, no one to hold them back, the water forcing them through the open tunnel towards the concrete below. Then we were released, the person in front of me moving forward. Our section teetered on its axis, bending backwards and then forwards. It overcompensated and a sharp lip was formed where it didn't quite line up with the section in front of it. I slid over it with my bare back, taking with it a long swath of skin. I laid in the pool where the slide deposited us, blood filling the pool from the sharp edge that took a piece of my back. There were dozens of us, crying, screaming, or in shock. 9 kids died that day, another 17 went to the hospital. I still have a white scar that crosses my back like a bolt. I still have trouble in confined spaces, and whenever I take a shower and let the water run down my face.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.